guys, welcome back to World of Tanks. My name is Bruce and today I want to talk about the best premium heavy tanks in World of Tanks. If you're interested in more reviews and gameplay, go to YouTube and search for World of Tanks with Bruce to get all of my videos, or click on the subscribe button. And now let's go. A couple of weeks ago I released a video about the 5 best premium tanks. In this list there wasn't a single heavy tank. Now, a lot of you argued that there are quite some excellent heavies, and while I do believe that medium tanks offer more flexibility on the battlefield, especially for good players, some of you just prefer heavy tanks in general. So in this video I will give you my list of the best premium heavy tanks in World of Tanks. So here's my top 10 list of the best premium heavy tanks in the game. Let's go. Number 10 on my list is the T26E5 Patriot. This tier 8 premium American heavy tank does have a great DPM, or let's say a strong DPM of approximately 2000. It has a very low reload time of only 6.9 seconds stock, which you can further increase and which is excellent for retracking opponents, just like you can see here against the WZ-111. It has a relatively good gun handling for a heavy tank, and it offers 10 degrees of gun depression. It has a, I would say, solid power to weight ratio with 15.09er, and it is just a hull down monster because it has an excellent turret armor. The upper hull is also relatively strong. However, what really shines is the turret armor with a very small cupola. Pretty difficult to hit, especially if you're using your 10 degrees of gun depression. Now, this tank has a good view range of 390 meters, and it is available in the bond shop, so you can get this tank for bonds. This is why it is definitely on my list. Now, what are the weaknesses of this tank? It has a low alpha damage of only 240, so nothing if you just want to trade 1v1 against your opponents. And yeah, the hull in general is not the strongest. The upper hull is relatively good if you angle it, however, or at least, but the rest of the hull is relatively weak. And so yeah, overall, how do I rate this tank? I rate it as a strength 4 out of 4. Unicom factor, so how easy is this tank to play? I give it a 6 out of 6 because you just have to play hull down. And as a credit maker, this tank is a 6 out of 6 because its shells are very cheap. Number 9 on my list is the Caernarvon AX 10. This tank has an ultra strong DPM, 2439. Base DPM is superb on tier 8. It features a very low reload time, even lower than the Patriot, with only 5.66 seconds stock, which is also excellent for retracking your or the enemy tanks. It has an excellent gun handling, best in class, 0.31 dispersion. The dispersion values while moving, tank traverse and turret traverse are also fantastic with 0.16, and it also features 10 degrees of gun depression. It has a good power to weight ratio of 16.92, so slightly better than the Patriot. However, the top speed is limited to 36. This tank is definitely another hull down monster. What are the weaknesses of this tank? It has a low alpha damage, only 230, so even lower than the Patriot, and the hull armor is relatively weak, so you have to use your 10 degrees of gun depression. Now, how do I rate this tank overall? Strength, in my opinion, 4 out of 6. Unicom factor, so is this tank easy to play? In my opinion, yes it is, 6 out of 6, because all you have to do is play hull down, as you can see here. And as a credit maker, in my opinion, 4 out of 6. The shell costs are not as low as compared to the Patriot, plus the alpha damage is relatively low, so only a 4 out of 6. Next tank on my list is the good old German tier 8 heavy tank, the Löwe. The Löwe features a good armor, 120mm of turret armor and 150mm of upper hull armor. However, the upper hull as well as the turret is nicely angled, so the armor profile is relatively strong. You can side scrape with this tank. It has 10 degrees of gun depression, which makes this tank also very flexible. It has a very fine gun handling, 0.32 dispersion and 0.2 dispersion values while moving or during tank traverse, and 0.12 during turret traverse, so very nice gun handling on this tank. It has an excellent view range of 400 meters, and it has a relatively strong penetration value on its silver ammunition of 232. So overall, the combination of good armor and a very nice gun handling makes this tank relatively strong. It is one of the oldest tanks, however still very strong as it got buffed sometimes. Now the weakness of this tank is it only has 320 alpha damage, which is, let's say, not enough to trade with more modern tier 8 heavy tanks. It is relatively slow, only 11.67 power to weight ratio, and the shells are relatively expensive, 1030 shell cost, and you have to compare this or see this in regards to the only 320 alpha damage. Yeah, but all in all, the Löwe is still a great tank and certainly belongs to that list. Now, how do I rate this tank all in all? Strength, in my opinion, 5 out of 5. Unicorn factor, so is this tank easy to play? I rate it as a 5 out of 6, and as a credit maker I would say 3 out of 6 due to the fact that the shell costs are relatively high compared to other tanks. Number 7 on my list is the French tier 8 autoloader premium tank, the Somua SM. This tank features an autoloader gun with 5x 300 alpha damage. It has a very good penetration value, 232mm of base penetration on its silver ammunition, and 2.25 seconds intra-clip reload, which means that you can deal 1500 damage within only 9 seconds. So the base DPM is relatively high for an autoloader tank, 2001 base DPM, even better than the Löwe. Now this tank has an okay-ish gun handling, I would say, at least for a heavy tank. Base dispersion is 0.38, however the dispersion values while moving are 0.2, also during tank traverse. Now the dispersion values during turret traverse are 0.14, so relatively strong. This tank features 10 degrees of gun depression, which makes it very flexible to play. Now its weakness is that it does have a weak turret armor, only 120mm of turret armor, and the turret armor is angled a little bit. However, basically every other tier 8 tank will be able to penetrate your turret. However, the upper hull is relatively strong, 140mm plus a nice angling, so you can bounce shots. However, experienced players will take shots to your cupola, so yeah, you have to watch out for this. Now the power to weight ratio is 12.86, so it's not a very mobile tank. It's also not the best credit maker because of the shell costs of 1030 per shell. And yeah, the last weakness is it does not have the best view range. 307 meters of base view range is okay, however it is certainly not the strongest value, and for example if you compare to the Löwe with its 400. Now overall, how do I rate this tank? In my opinion, strength 5 out of 6. Yes, a weak turret, however an autoloader tank with I would say solid gun handling, and yeah, very as an autoloader, just a strong tank. Now unicorn factor, I rate this 3 out of 6 because autoloaders are in general tough to play and tough to master, and as a credit maker it's also only a 3 out of 6 due to the fact that the shells are relatively expensive. Number 6 on my list is the 50TP prototype, the Polish tier 8 heavy tank. This tank features a very solid, or I would rather say strong armor. Now the armor does have its weak spots, but they are not as easy to hit. So overall in my opinion, a very strong armor profile. Now, this tank lets you play pretty aggressively due to its armor, and it has a relatively high alpha gun on tier 8, 440 damage. It is relatively mobile for a heavy tank, and if you take into consideration that you have a very heavily armored vehicle, so power to weight ratio of 14.33 is not too bad for such a tank. Gun handling is not the worst, I would say, especially if you take the 440 alpha damage into consideration. It has a solid view range of 380 meters. The shell costs, or the shells are relatively cheap, and it does have 10 degrees of gun depression. Now, the weakness, as I said, there are some weak spots of its armor. So against experts and very experienced players, yeah, you will most likely be penetrated, at least if they are using premium ammunition. But overall, the armor profile really works. Now, as you can see, it's not really a snapshot king. And yeah, overall, how do I rate this tank? In my opinion, it is a 5 out of 5, a very solid tier 8 premium heavy tank. Unicum factor, is this tank easy to play? Well, I rate it as a 5 out of 6, just because you can just play aggressively, move in, bounce shots with your armor, and then punish your opponents with your 440 alpha damage. Now, as a credit maker, in my opinion, it is a 5 out of 6 due to the fact that the shell costs are relatively cheap. And yeah, so overall, a very solid number 6 on my list of the best premium heavy tanks in World of Tanks. Number 5 of the best premium heavy tanks in World of Tanks is the German tier 8 heavy tank, the E75 TS. This is basically a lightly armored version of the E75, but on tier 8. Its strengths are that it is a relatively mobile heavy tank, 1280 horsepower, and a power to weight ratio of 16 is very good for a heavy tank. And with 1280 horsepower, you can really use a turbo and make this tank even more mobile. Now, the gun handling is superb in my opinion for a heavy tank. 2.4 seconds base aim time and 0.36 gun dispersion, as well as good dispersion values while moving and also while tank traverse. Now, the dispersion value while moving the turret is only 0.1, so very strong. Now, this tank has an ultra strong turret with basically a very tiny cupola as a weak spot, and so it is super strong. Base armor of the turret is, or frontal armor of the turret is 230 millimeters. It is very nicely rounded, so this tank is a hull down monster in my opinion, which makes it very strong. So the combination of a mobile heavy tank, which is a fantastic hull down player, makes this tank very strong. Now, it also features a very strong view range of 390 meters, and the weakness is that the hull is relatively weak. Yes, if you use your 8 degrees of gun depression that this tank offers, your upper hull becomes quite strong. However, the rest of the hull is relatively weak. And also the shell costs are relatively high. 1030 for 360 damage does mean that this is not the best credit maker as a heavy tank. So all in all, how do I rate this tank? In my opinion, strength 5 out of 6. Unicum factor, in my opinion, also 5 out of 6. Just play hull down and you will benefit from this tank with its strong turret. And as a credit maker, in my opinion, this tank is a 3 out of 3. Number 4 on my list is the M54 Renegade. This tank is also a very mobile heavy tank, comparable to the E75 TS. it has a 45 kilometers per hour top speed and a power to weight ratio of 16.15, so very mobile. Now it has a superb gun handling, 2.4 seconds aim time, 0.36 dispersion, and also superb dispersion values, 0.15 dispersion while moving and while tank traverse and during tank traverse, and only 0.10 during turret traverse. Now it has a nice DPM of 2208 base DPM, which is very strong, and it has a very good, I would say, bouncy armor profile. 250 millimeters of turret armor makes the turret very strong, and 152 millimeters on the hull, but the hull is very yeah, I would say boat shaped, so very bouncy. Now the big problem of this tank is its huge cupola on top, just like with the tier 10 American heavy tank, the T26E5. Now this tank features a very solid view range, or I should say excellent view range, with 400 meters. Now, as I said, the cupola is actually the biggest weak spot of this tank, and the costs, the shell costs are relatively high. 360 alpha damage for 1000, or cost 1005. So not once again, not the best credit maker, just like the E75 TS. However, a very fine heavy tank. And yeah, I would say rather for the more experienced player, because you really have to waggle around in order to hide your cupola. Overall, in my opinion, this tank is a 6 out of 6 when it comes to the overall strength. Unicum factor, so is this tank easy to play? In my opinion, no, not at all, so 3 out of 6. And as a credit maker, in my opinion, this tank is a 3 out of 6. Number 3 on my list, so in my opinion the third best heavy tank that you can play in World of Tanks nowadays is the Object 252/ the Defender. Now this tank offers good, good is not the correct word, I should say superior armor. With this tank you can even play and defeat tier 10 tanks, as the armor profile of this tank is just so incredibly strong. 250 millimeters of turret armor, and there's basically not a single weak spot. Yes, there are 2 cupolas, but they are, it has like, my impression is that those cupolas are just a millimeter tall, so just a pixel that you can hit, and basically non-existent. So very strong turret. Now 130 millimeters of turret armor, sorry, of hull armor, but it is extremely nicely angled, so as you can see, you will definitely bounce most of the shots fired towards your tank. Now with the Object 252 you can play very aggressively. You can just face hug your opponents and they will not be able to penetrate you. This tank features a high alpha gun. 440 damage, is very strong on tier 8, and it is a relatively mobile heavy tank. 35 kilometers top speed is not the best value, however the power to weight ratio is 16.5, so a very strong combination of firepower, armor, and also mobility. Yeah. The downside of this tank is its relatively bad gun handling, 0.42 dispersion, base dispersion, and the dispersion values while moving and while during tank traverse is 0.24. Now the dispersion value during turret traverse is 0.12, and yeah, as a Russian heavy tank, sometimes the gun handling just feels better as it is on paper. So yeah, on paper bad gun handling, but sometimes you're really surprised how much this tank can actually hit. Now the view range is very low, with only 350 meters, and it only offers 6 degrees of gun depression, so you definitely don't have the most flexible tank, I can say. However, as I said, the combination of firepower, mobility, and armor is superb on tier 8. Now this tank is quite old, however it is did you see this shot? Like, it made the impression that this shot went 1 meter next to the KV4. However, yeah, Russian magic applies, and then you just hit your shots. Yeah, so all in all, the Defender, in my opinion, the third best heavy tank in the game. Strength overall, definitely a 6 out of 6. Unicum factor, definitely a 6 out of 6. This tank is just so easy to play. It is, and I would call it a brain dead tank. You just drive forward. Oh, and by the way, you can even bounce the shots that are fired to the rear of your tank. Yeah, man, and as a credit maker, in my opinion, it is a 4 out of 6. Yes, each shell costs 1025. However, you are dealing 420 damage and not 360 compared to the M54 Renegade. Yeah, so overall, the Defender, in my opinion, a very fine tank. If you want to buy a premium tank, consider to wait for the Defender. The second best tank, in my opinion, in World of Tanks is the Object 7032, the double barrel tier 8 Russian heavy tank, which features a very strong armor. Now, the armor profile of this tank is not quite as strong as the Defender, however, very, very strong. It has 390 alpha damage, however, as it is a double barrel tank, you can pump out 780 damage with a single double shot. So extremely strong for tier 8. This tank has a base dispersion of 0.42, which is not the best on tier 8, even for a heavy tank. However, the dispersion values are superb with dispersion while moving, and tank reverse only 0.12, and the dispersion values while turning the turret is only 0.06, and this balances out the bad dispersion value in general. So as you can see, this tank really hits its shots. Now, this tank is obviously relatively slow, power to weight ratio of only 12.5 and a top speed of 38 km per hour. However, yeah, all in all, it is just a fantastic, in my opinion, a fantastic heavy tank with a very, very strong combination of firepower, relatively good gun handling due to the dispersion values, and a good armor profile. Now, this tank only has 350 meters of view range, just like the Defender, so it is relatively blind. Plus, it only has 5 degrees of gun depression, so once again, not a very flexible tank that you can play. However, in my opinion, it is definitely the second best heavy tank in the game, and yeah, playing the double barrel tanks just gives you a flexibility that other tanks do not have. You can pump out, as I said, 780 damage if you conduct the double shot, or you just have the flexibility of dealing 390 alpha damage, which is very strong for tier 8. And if you've taken one shot, you still have the flexibility to do the other shot, which is once again very strong for a tier 8 heavy tank. Now, as you can see, you will definitely bounce shots compared to the other tanks. So yeah, all in all, how do I rate this fantastic heavy tank? In my opinion, strength, it is 6 out of 6. Unicum factor, is this tank easy to play? I rate it as a 5 out of 6. Now, the double barrel tanks are not the easiest ones, because most of the time you will you will want to make the double shot. However, it is most of the time smarter to only use it as a single shot tank. And as a credit maker, all in all, in my opinion, it is a 3 out of 6, because the shell costs are even higher than compared to the Defender. So yeah, all in all, in my opinion, definitely a reasonable number 2 on this list. And finally, in my opinion, the best tier 8 premium heavy tank in World of Tanks, or in general the best premium heavy tank, the Skoda T56, the new Czech tier 8 heavy tank. Now, this tank also features a very strong armor with only minor weak spots that are very, very tough to hit. Now, this tank offers 460 alpha damage with a single shot, which is superb for tier 8, and with its autoloader gun you can deal 920 burst damage within only 3.5 seconds. So yeah, basically superb for a tier 8 heavy tank. Now this tank doesn't even have a bad gun handling. Well, 0.4 dispersion is better, at least compared to the Defender and the Object 703. Plus the dispersion values are also pretty strong, 0.2 while moving and 0.2 while tank traverse, and 0.12 during turret traverse. So the gun handling just doesn't feel as bad as it is on paper, and overall the gun handling is very nice, and the combination of firepower of this tremendous firepower for tier 8 in combination with the good armor is just excellent in World of Tanks. Now the shell costs of this tank are relatively low. 930 for a 460 alpha gun is relatively nice. However, the penetration values of the silver ammunition are only 208 millimeters, which is quite lackluster nowadays for tier 8, so you will definitely have to press the 2 key once in a while. Now another drawback is the view range, which is not too bad, I should say, but 370 meters of view range is definitely not the best value. So yeah, this is kind of how Wargaming tried to balance this tank. However, in my opinion, this tank is the best one, definitely currently in the game. Now it's not the fastest one. It has 13.54 power to weight ratio and a top speed of only 35 kilometers per hour. However, in my opinion, the combination, as I said, of firepower, of flexibility with your autoloader gun and of your armor profile is excellent. You still do have a very good and solid gun handling, and this just makes this tank so much better than the rest of the heavy tanks. Now in my opinion, how do I rate this tank all in all? Definitely strength, it is a 6 out of 6. Now is this tank easy to play? No, definitely not. It is more a tank for the experienced players. If you are if your experience level is relatively low, then you should definitely go maybe for the Defender. So I rate this tank as a 3 out of 6 when it comes to the Unicum factor, and as a credit maker, in my opinion, it is actually a 5 out of 6. Yes, the base penetration value is relatively low, however, in my opinion, 208 is sufficient for tier 8, and the shell costs are relatively low. So yeah, all in all, a very fine tank, and in my opinion, right now the best heavy tank that you can get in World of Tanks, at least if you're an experienced player. Alright guys, that was it for today with my recommendation of the best heavy tanks in World of Tanks. Do you agree with my list? Just leave a comment in the comment section down below. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. Consider subscribing to my channel, and I see you next time in another World of Tanks video.